Richard Vanderveer is joining PeopleMetrics as Chief Insight Officer, Physician CX. Super excited to have Richard join us. He has 40 years experience talking up to physicians around kind of their wants and needs. And, Richard read my book, Pharma Customer Experience, and got super excited about the ability to really change the dialogue between pharmaceutical companies and physicians, which is certainly a customer that, I talk about in my book. In Pharma Customer Experience, I talk a lot about the patient, but in the physician is as important in many cases. And Richard is super passionate about that. Richard and I are working on a second book around the pharma customer experience world focused on physicians. And we're both super excited to get that out to the world at some point, likely in 2023. And we sort of wanted to introduce the topic today and, go through it a little bit. So let me just talk a little bit. Alexander, why don't you put up the first slide we have to go through today? And if anybody's read my book, Pharma Customer Experience, they will have seen this first slide. We're going to get to the actions to improve CX, physician CX now, but this framework here, and it really doesn't matter what pharma customer we're talking about, whether it be a patient or a physician, HCP, or even a caregiver. What the book really talks about is, how do you understand the kind of experiences you want to deliver to your customer? And that's really where, Alexandra, the great industries who are super, who get reputations for great customer experience, they spend a lot of time in this first box, or circle, creating CX intentionally. What that means is they're not just waiting for customer experience to happen by chance and then reacting to it. They are deliberately orchestrating it. Like, if you've ever been to a hotel that really has their act together, or a great restaurant that's really humming, it just doesn't happen like that, right? They're orchestrating those experiences and planning for them ahead of time. And that's really the first step in any kind of great CX. Right? I mean, Alexandra, you're a consumer. You must have had situations where you have a great experience and a poor experience, and right, now you've been here a while, that isn't by chance.
Absolutely. And even personally and business-wise, a lot of the vendors that we end up choosing do happen to be word of mouth. And when it is word of mouth, it's normally a great experience. And I've also had very poor experiences where I'm sifting through the internet to see all of the negative reviews and use that to an advantage. So understanding how your customers are feeling in every step of the process is very important, and even more so with patient experience.
Right. And with the physician, also the experience that pharma is delivering to physicians, you have to think about it. If you're in charge of that at a pharmaceutical company, think about how you're interacting with physicians today. Is it sales reps? Hey, Richard, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine. How can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey.
We kicked it off. I was
methodological triumph.
Yes. I was just going through the Pharma CX methodology and talking about how it applies to all of pharma's customers, patients, physicians, caregivers, whomever they're interacting with. It's extremely important to create experiences intentionally, because I have this saying, and I've said this on PeopleMetrics Live before, customers will have experiences whether you craft them or not, right? But when you don't craft them intentionally, they tend not to be very good. They tend to be haphazard. They tend to have a lot of friction. They tend to be difficult. They tend to be disorganized. So when you're thinking about interacting with your, I would say, primary customers in pharma, physicians and patients, it's extremely important to intentionally map out the experiences you want those customers to have. And then obviously measuring whether those experiences were good or not is a key part to having a world-class Pharma CX program. So were the experiences good? Which ones were good? What segment of customer enjoyed the experience? Which segment of customer didn't? Why not? Why? There's all these questions you can answer in the measurement phase. And then the great customer experience companies in the world, they just don't intentionally create and measure. They manage proactively. So when they see something going on with the customer experience after measuring it, they're changing things quickly, both at a systemic level across the organization and even at an individual level. If you have a customer who had a very poor experience, they're following up on that customer and making it right. This is a feedback loop that goes around and around. And there's no like magic formula to having a great customer experience. It's about these three things really, and doing them over and over again. And with that, I'd like to officially welcome Richard. Hello, Richard.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we're super excited to have you aboard. Why don't you tell the audience about yourself and kind of why you're excited to join us?
Yeah, I'll do that. I think that the feedback loop that Sean just very aptly described is what really has me interested in the pharmaceutical industry in general, with physicians in particular, because I have observed over recent years, as our subsequent slides will show, really major fallbacks in terms of providing an excellent customer experience to our physician customers. So I intend to apply my 45 years of experience in pharmaceutical marketing research and my PhD in psychology to really help explore the best way to approach Pharma CX in general, physician CX more specifically. There's a problem there. I'd like to help solve it.
Right, because when physicians have a great experience, that can only bode well for the patients achieving their medical outcomes. Right, they're very, very intertwined. Those two, the two customers of pharma.
I sort of equate it. Pharmaceuticals are a directed consumer good, sort of like a college textbook. You've got two customers. The student actually buys the textbook, but you have to make sure that you take care of the professor as well in terms of getting her interest, her buy-in, because those two are, as you just pointed out, very, very interconnected in assuring a satisfactory outcome.
Definitely. So, so Richard, let's just talk about kind of what is going on, like how pharmaceutical companies have been interacting with physicians and the experience they have been delivering kind of since you've been studying physicians, right? You know a lot about them. You've been talking to them for 45 years. Where are we today and kind of where do we need to go with it?
Well, I'll show you a few slides that unfortunately I think reflect where we are today. I could show you hundreds of slides, but this is a pretty good summary slide that says that basically the physician customer experience has been in recent years in decline. The need to apply that kind of feedback loop that Sean just talked about, the design, to measure, and to optimize, has been left by the wayside, and we need to do a much better job taking care of that. A few slides that reflect over the years, sort of in chronological order. 2018, this is not a new problem, by the way, Sean. It's a problem with doctors that's been around for a long time. 2018, nearly half of U.S. physicians restricted access by manufacturers' sales representatives. And at the time, 4 years ago, they were talking about needing new strategies to reach doctors. Things didn't get a heck of a lot better in 2019, as you'll see. Doctors increasingly too busy to see pharma sales reps, reports find.
And this is before the world changed, right?
Oh yeah, this is totally pre-pandemic. The pandemic, all the industry pundits that I talked to, and I would agree with them wholeheartedly on this, they believe that the trend that we are seeing now, as we sit here in 2022, was exacerbated by the pandemic, but it wasn't really caused by the pandemic, as doctor after doctor has told me. They were already moving in the direction of stepping away from representatives for a number of different reasons that we can talk about. And then the poo hits the fan. We've got the pandemic rolling along. And what we see is that in 2020, doctor access was basically blocked for several months. In early 2020, as the pandemic hit its peak, one of its many peaks. And you see that only 27% of doctors reported a personal contact with representatives. And you see at this point that the digital detailing, virtual detailing as it's sometimes referred to, starts to rise up, as do a couple other sources of information like emails and texts and that kind of thing. One of the sidebars here, there are a couple sidebars here that I think are really important that you know, in the time I've been talking with Sean about this, really helped me understand just how different a population physicians are. First of all, there are groups that are actively working against good customer experience or any customer experience for doctors with pharmaceutical companies. There's a group called No Advertising Please that will provide doctors with this little poster that you see on the left-hand side that they can post in their office saying, representatives, go away, and they sign a pledge. The doctors sign a pledge that they will not allow representatives in. Just so on the right side, what you see is an announcement that hospitals, hospital systems, and large group practices that are owned by health systems are increasingly making sure that representatives gain no access to the doctors contained in that organization. Why? Two reasons. A, it's been demonstrated that doctors who are in contact with representatives prescribe more expensive products outside of guidelines typically, and the other reason is that they don't want doctors' time being taken up by representatives. Increasingly, doctors who are burned out, by the way, very burned out by this process, increasingly doctors are expected to see a huge number of patients every day, and that doesn't fit nicely with spending time with representatives. So everybody's making the prediction, everybody's probably overkill here, but most people who understand the industry are saying that virtual sales reps and physicians' engagement is to remain a new standard post-COVID-19. There was a question back in 2020 and 2021 as to whether the virtual detail on Zoom, for example, or other platforms, was going to go away as soon as the bug did. Well, first of all, the bug hasn't gone entirely away. But second of all, it seems that doctor preferences, doctor habits got readjusted as a result of the pandemic. They really started to question this notion of having the representative come in live and in person. And many of them, as we'll see, are happier having a virtual interaction. Here's a very interesting slide that speaks to the point that I just made, that Bain and Company has published. Prior to the beginning of the pandemic, the percentage of doctors who preferred in-person visits was about 3/4, around for purposes of discussion. It gets a little gloppy after the pandemic, you'll see, but you'll see that the doctors are increasingly favoring either digital kinds of interactions or the kinds of hybrid interactions, a mixture of personal and digital, that some people are talking about this concept of the hybrid promotional model. What you see here is a situation where there are various specialties who are demonstrating various behaviors. In terms of preference for more personal, more digital, or keep it the way it is. My favorite one to look at there is right in the center, medical oncology, where the last thing apparently clinical oncologists want is a representative coming into their office. They're much happier getting a higher, what they consider to be a higher quality presentation presented digitally. So that's sort of the circumstance as we see it, Sean, right?
You know, it's really interesting, right? Like, unpacking that a little bit, Richard. You know, it seems like, you know, the experience that physicians have had over the years is largely influenced by the strategy of pharma to send reps into their office, and it's changing, right? So the delivery mechanism may change, but the physicians still desire quality information from pharmaceutical companies, and that's the desired experience. Is that correct?
Absolutely. When you start to unpack this, and I've had the opportunity, it's been a great opportunity to spend hundreds of hours on Zoom calls with physicians, having conversations. Let me just stop and romance that for a second, because when I in 2022 talk about having a conversation with a doctor, there's no topical guide. It's not an interview. The doctor is recruited for a conversation, and it's extremely open-ended. What I say to the doctor is, doctor, I am here to understand your engagements with the pharmaceutical industry. Tell me what you've done in the last week, any kind of contact that you've had with the pharmaceutical industry whatsoever. I want you to talk to me about that. I'm going to listen quietly. That's my job. Talk to me. And from there, I've learned a bunch of things in terms of customer experience and the lack of quality therein when it comes to pharmaceutical companies. What I'm finding is that what I have found that I'm finding is that doctors are increasingly turned off by many of the tactics that the pharmaceutical industry is using in this key customer experience that you just talked about. Representatives are only one touch point, as we call them in CX, but it's an important touch point. Doctors are just amazed by how frequently and offended by how frequently we come in and give them reminder details, AKA tell them the same thing they've heard time and time again. Doctor after doctor has asked me, why do they do that? They must think we're stupid. That's a waste of my time. They also very much object to what they call some of them call used car sales tactics. The classic trial close. Doctor, can I count on you to use my product for the next 10 of your fill in the blank patients? Doctors do not like to be sold is the general principle there. There's even a more general principle that is a part of, and that is that doctors are very, very protective, as I've already suggested, of their time. And different doctors, we found, have different ways of managing their time and controlling the nature of the relationship with the representative or other forms of pharmaceutical contact. We found that there are different promotional engagement personas, as I like to call them, that we encounter. And I'll give you an example of two. One is the open door doctor. When I call the doctor and ask that suggested topic that I just talked about, the doctor immediately responds, I've got an open door policy to representatives. But when you scroll down on that, what you see is it's a very low quality open door. The representative comes in, might get 5 minutes of the doctor's time. That's controlled by the front desk, another factor that has to be explored here, the lady at the front desk. But the doctor will sign for samples, and that winds up being a key part of the transaction for the open door doc. Allow the representative maybe a minute to talk about his product, maybe a minute of social activity, and that's it. That's not a very high quality promotional activity, and that kind of activity is more, as I suggested, more characteristic of doctors and practices and specialties where samples are very important. You also have doctors who I call the catering clinicians who in exchange for their time, 3 to 5 days a week in some offices, have representatives come in and provide food for the entire office. The office very much appreciates this. The office staff is typically underpaid and overworked, especially during the pandemic. And doctors consider this to be a very nice way of repaying the office staff for serving under those conditions. The representative used to get an hour of quality time during those sit-down lunches, but now lunches come pre-wrapped from a disease control perspective. Frequently, the staff members just come in, pick up a sandwich, and leave, so that the representative is left getting only a few minutes with doctors once again. So there are all kinds of interesting things happening that suggest that there are different kinds of doctors demanding different kinds of, for lack of a better term, value for their time. Right. They expect value for their time. They expect to control that interaction. And they're minimizing that interaction because they are not perceiving themselves to be getting much quality in terms of what they're looking for. As one rheumatologist said to me, I think very sagely, the job of the pharmaceutical representative is to help me to help my patients. And here's the kicker, the second part of the quote: I already know about the drugs, about the products. Right. So she's looking for help. She's looking for help with patient service support programs, patient access programs, updates on formularies. There are all kinds of things she's looking for, but not a repeat of the same product message.
It seems like this is a real inflection point in the pharmaceutical industry, right? To me, anyway. They're more and more product launches are struggling. There's obviously the generic pressures, there's pressures on although there's tremendous innovation, especially in the biotechnology and biosimilar space, right? So there's great products coming out. Is this an inflection point that we're going to look back at in 10 years and say, wow, this was a really important time to rethink the way that pharma thinks about their customers and how they interact with them across the board?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really we're at the intersection of two inflection points. We're at crossroads, if you will. And one is what you just said. It is a lot of new products coming out, a lot of good new products coming out. Yep. With those products not infrequently failing to meet expectations. A large percentage of products are failing. So that's one inflection point. We've got the problems that I just talked about. So that's another inflection point. We need to make that go away. And the opportunity there seems to be in most people's eyes, and I think there's a great opportunity and a great risk here in the area of omnichannel marketing, if you
Yes.
will.
Yes.
People are talking about the joining of push with pull, which is, if you start to think about it, we now have to not only convince doctors to use our products, we need to convince them to pull out information,
Yep.
the right information about our product, which is a regulatory challenge as well as a marketing challenge.
It is.
But I think that as we approach omni-channel marketing, yeah, that's the increased use of digital, the personal falling behind the digital. It's anticipated by lots of folks who are thinking about this. We've got to do this just right in order for that to work at all. Omni-channel is not a solution in and of itself. It's a way to get to a solution. And the next slide really talks about the three things that the title of this webinar really focuses in on. The three actions to improve physician customer experience are these. We need to customize our approach to this omni-channel marketing to match those. Remember, I talked about the personas a few moments ago. We need to understand a doctor's information consumption habits, and they are habits. Just like his or her prescribing is habit, the information consumption and interaction and engagement patterns are also habits. We need to customize up against the persona that the doctor is a member of. We need to individualize our approach to the doctor based on what he's doing now. What are his habit patterns now? If he's starting to use our new product, is he trying it? Is he using it? We need to match the message to where the doctor is. And last but not least, personalize. That rheumatologist that I told you about who wants us to help her patients. We need to find out what kind of help she's looking for and provide that help. Those are really the three actions that are going to help revamp, redo, rethink that feedback loop that you talked about at the beginning of the webinar.
And these are concepts, and the omnichannel marketing obviously is something that other industries have done very well and for a long time. It's a approach that makes a lot of sense. Segments of customers is something obviously lots of industries have, but I think it's the thinking of it as experiences, right? So one of the things I think about with pharmaceutical companies is, they make incredible products, like miracle products, right? Like things that you can't even believe would be invented to cure disease. And it's easy, I guess, just to say, hey, that's it, we're done. The rest will take care of itself, but the rest isn't taking care of itself, because all of the doctors and all of the patients that they're dealing with are also consumers of Amazon and Spotify and Target and whatever other good experience, Whole Foods, whatever good experience company you want to talk about. So their expectations have changed. And we hear this from patients too, and physicians, Richard, like, why does it have to be so hard? Why is it so different than every other industry that I deal with? And we know that there's regulatory constraints that other industries may not have and don't have. But the whole idea of creating experiences this way is a very, very big shift, I would say, but has potential to create incredible rewards for both the pharmaceutical company and, most importantly, the patient's outcomes. And the physician obviously is very involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of specific examples of what you're talking about. Doctors during the pandemic, when I would talk to them about the impact of the pandemic on their practices, they were all wondering why every company that was involved in virtual details was using a different platform. They would have to download and learn to use a different platform to talk to one representative from one company. That didn't seem very easy. That didn't seem very customer friendly as an experience. The other example that I would offer real quickly is in patient support programs. Doctors are very, very bullish on having easy access, consistent, fair access that allows their patients to get drugs at a discount, to get case managers, whatever kind of support is necessary. So if there's a guiding principle here, to your point, making access to these wonderful drugs easier and less time consuming for the doctor is certainly a guiding light here.
And the push-pull methodology that you mentioned in the previous slide, I mean, that goes across every industry, right? It's like there's certain industries where, you have a salesperson who is, calling on customers, right? In a B2B business or a software business, but you also have websites and other types of information like PeopleMetrics Live, Alexandra, where people are pulling, right? Like we're doing this session. Hopefully somebody sees value out of it. They go to our YouTube channel and they pull it, right? And they get value from it. Like we're not calling every single person who ever watches PeopleMetrics Live to ask them to watch it, right? They know about it and then they pull it. And, you know, it seems like push has been what's worked historically and kind of been the modus operandi, but things have changed and will change, I think, going forward. And the pull has got to be much more important, I would think.
One of the things that's got to change is the industry myth that you have to tell a doctor the same carefully fine-tuned message 7 or 8 times for him to understand it. You need to keep communicating with the physician. You need to keep reminding, but you cannot use that same language. You cannot perceive yourself as delivering just a reminder detail and expect yourself to get away with it.
Yeah, it's like, what does it take to get you in this car type of thing, right? It's a ridiculous in some ways. Like you said, these are some of the more intelligent people in the world, the physicians, right? So they don't need to be reminded 10 times likely about a message.
Yeah, they're looking for meaningful updates, as I said, formulary updates, treatment updates, indication updates.
Yep.
But basically, if we provide them with quality information, what we look to get out the other end, and this is a slide deck of 3s as we stand back and look at it, 3 steps in your feedback loop, three things to help us do better omni-channel marketing. And the outcome of that is also going to be threefold, we believe. We're going to get more access to physicians. I mean, it's going to be interesting. One of the things that I'm watching is the extent to which a pharmaceutical company will pull a land grab. How many pharmaceutical companies do you need to access to get updates in a particular treatment area? Some companies like Novartis, for example, are working very hard to become dominant as the channel that doctors will go to. But somebody's going to get more access to physicians, and that's going to be an interesting competition. We're going to be having more pull by physicians, and that, if you think about it, is a whole new art from a marketing perspective. This takes us to Seth Godin and permission marketing. This takes us to a situation where we need the doctor to want to have that information. He's not pinned up against the wall by a representative who is doing what one of my colleagues called show up and throw up with a standardized message. This is a different ballgame from a marketing perspective. And last but not least, we have to remember one of the many reasons that we're interested in the physician customer having a good experience, and that is we're going to get better connectivity with patients.
Yes.
With drug onboarding, especially with complicated and expensive kinds of drug therapies, clinical trials, we need the doctors there both as conduits to the patient and as customers themselves per se. So it's a fascinating time. It goes back to your crossroads comment at the inflection point comments a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
that's where we are.
And especially with underserved populations that we're, getting them in clinical trials is so important, and the physician experience to make that as a conduit is really key. These are all connecting together, and we've done PeopleMetrics Live on clinical trials as well. The experience begins there for patients from a pharmaceutical company interaction, and a physician is certainly extremely important there too.
Yes, absolutely.
Alexandra, we've been just chatting away. How are we doing?
Yes. We're out of time, but I'm going to squeeze in a little extra just for a question.
Okay.
Okay. If I want to better understand and improve the physician experience, where do I begin?
Simple. Sean can have a shot at this too, but my answer would be a very simple one, and it would be a one-word answer: listen. I have found that absolutely revelatory to listen to doctors talk about their experiences. When I do this open mic kind of procedure, as I like to call it, I have the opportunity to learn a bunch of things that I can't learn from traditional survey research. I get the opportunity to listen to salience. Doctors talk about the most important things to them first and longest. I get the opportunity to listen for emotion. Which of these things do doctors feel strongly about? You start to see them facial behavior twitch when they get to some things that are important to them. Last but not least, language. What do the doctors talk about in their terminology? What are they saying? Well, go listen to your customers like I've been listening to your customers. That's the place to get started.
Yeah, I mean, I would just build on that. Like, I think when you're in a situation where you've interacted with a key customer the same way for so long, it's important to step back and just listen to them open-ended, like without an agenda. How can we serve you better? How would you like to be served in the future? What can we do better to help your practice and your patients? Rather than like diving into messages and how many times you want to see a sales rep and what is this digital channel? What do you like this digital channel or that digital channel? I think it's got to be almost like a clean slate. Take a look at the relationship you have with the physician and create one intentionally that you think your segment of physician that you're targeting would really get value out of.
Agreed. And let me hasten to add that physicians are more than happy to talk about what it is that we've been talking about today. They want to share these experiences. They want to give their guidance to pharmaceutical companies because they understand things have not been going all that well in terms of customer experience. They're anxious to talk about this. Our job is to let them.
Well, Richard, we're going to have a lot more conversations just like this one. All right, Alexander, coming up.
Definitely be a part 2, maybe even part 3. But well, thank you both for joining us and sharing your expertise today. This has been a wonderful session, minus the glitches. And thank you all for joining. We'll see you next time on PeopleMetrics Live. Take care, all.
Thanks, Alexander.